Some stories are too big to die. They become legends, whispered on the wind from one generation to the next. They tell of epic battles, forgotten kings, treasures beyond imagination. But what if one of those legends turned out to be real? For centuries, the tale of the Colossus of Rhodes was just that, a myth. It was a story of a giant bronze god that once straddled a harbor, a beacon of power and ingenuity lost to time. We've all heard the whispers, the tantalizing clues in ancient texts. But the physical proof? It was gone, swallowed by the sea. The search for the Colossus has been the holy grail for adventurers and archaeologists. It's a quest that feels almost impossible. You're not just looking for a needle in a haystack, you're looking for a specific piece of bronze in an entire ocean. The currents, the sediment, the sheer vastness of the Aegean Sea, all conspire to keep its secrets buried. Many have tried, and for centuries every single one of them has failed. Before we dive into the deep, let's set the stage. The ancient world was a place of incredible ambition. Rulers and empires wanted to leave their mark. They built things to scream power and glory across the ages. The very best became known as the Seven Wonders. This wasn't an official list, it read more like a travel guide, compiled by Greek writers like Philo of Byzantium, for sightseers chasing the most awe-inspiring structures. These weren't just buildings, they were statements of human achievement. They pushed the limits of engineering and art. Think of the sheer scale. Great Pyramid of Giza, the only wonder still standing. Hanging Gardens of Babylon, Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, Statue of Zeus at Olympia, scattered across the Mediterranean and Middle East. The story of the Colossus begins with a victory. Around 305 BC, the small island of Rhodes found itself under siege. An ambitious general named Demetrius Poliorcetes, whose nickname meant the Besieger of Cities, arrived with a massive army and incredible war machines. He brought 40,000 soldiers and enormous siege towers. For an entire year, the people of Rhodes held out against impossible odds. When Demetrius finally gave up and sailed away, he left behind his entire arsenal of advanced siege equipment. The Rhodians had not just survived, they had won a treasure trove of military hardware. So, what do you do when you've just won a historic victory and are left with a mountain of enemy weaponry? You celebrate in the biggest way imaginable. The Rhodians decided to sell the abandoned siege equipment. With the enormous profits, they commissioned a monument to their patron god, Helios, the sun god, to thank him for their salvation. For just over half a century, the Colossus stood as a testament to Rhodian pride. Imagine being a sailor in the 3rd century BC, approaching the island of Rhodes. Long before you could make out the city walls, you would see it, a flash of brilliant light on the Aegean Sea. The light resolving into a massive shape, a gigantic bronze man, the sun god Helios himself, seeming to rise from the water. An unforgettable sight, a symbol of power and artistry. It was the wonder of its age. But the Mediterranean is a geologically active region. Earthquakes are a fact of life. In 226 BC, a devastating earthquake rocked Rhodes. The city was shattered, buildings toppled into rubble. The Colossus was brought to its knees. Strabo tells us it snapped at the knees and came crashing down. For 56 years it had stood tall, and in moments, it was gone. The mighty bronze god now lay broken on the ground. The king of Egypt, Ptolemy III, offered to pay for reconstruction. The Rhodians consulted the Oracle of Delphi. The oracle warned them not to rebuild. They feared offending Helios. So they left the giant where it fell. Fast forward to the 21st century, the story of the Colossus had become a legend. But for a new generation of explorers, it was a cold case waiting to be solved. The question was no longer if it could be found, but how. Underwater archaeology has been totally transformed by technology. The old days of divers and grid patterns with limited visibility are over. The modern hunt used a fleet of tools to peer through centuries of sand and sediment. The mission, led by the Hellenic Institute of Marine Archaeology, was one of the most ambitious underwater surveys ever attempted. The primary challenge is the environment itself. The harbor of Rhodes is not a placid swimming pool. It's a busy port with constant ship traffic. The seabed is a complex mixture of sand, mud, rock. All of it has been churned by current storms and human activity. Fragments would be buried, corroded, and likely indistinguishable from rock. Visibility is often poor and the search area is vast. You can't just go for a swim and find a 2,000-year-old bronze hand. For months, the search was a grind. The team meticulously mapped square kilometer after square kilometer of the Rhodian seabed. The sonar screens flickered with endless images of sand rock, a lost anchor, a discarded tire. It's honestly the reality of exploration. Long periods of monotony punctuated by fleeting moments of excitement. The data analysts stared at their screens for hours, their eyes trained to spot the slightest irregularity. They were looking for something that shouldn't be there, a shape that was just too angular, too dense, or too large to be natural. Then, it happened. While surveying a lesser-explored area just outside the main Mandrake Harbor entrance, an anomaly appeared on the sub-bottom profiler. It was different. This wasn't a vague shadow or a small lump. It was a massive, dense object buried under several feet of sediment. The shape was long and vaguely cylindrical, far too uniform to be a natural rock formation. The team's collective heart rate jumped. This could be anything, a sunken ship's mast, a large piece of modern construction debris, but it was also exactly the kind of signature they hoped to find. A large metallic object that had been there for a very, very long time. The next step was to deploy the ROV, affectionately named the Argo. The team gathered in the control room, a small, dark space filled with the glow of monitors. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. On the main screen, they watched the ROV descend through the murky blue water. It reached the coordinates of the anomaly, and its powerful lights cut through the darkness. At first, all they saw was a flat, sandy bottom, but as the pilot skillfully maneuvered the robot, using its thrusters to gently blow away the top layer of sediment, something began to emerge from the seafloor. It was dark, curved, and massive. It wasn't rock. It was green and mottled, covered in centuries of marine growth, but underneath the concretions, the distinct shape was undeniable. It was a colossal piece of cast bronze. The ROV's manipulator arm, equipped with a small-scale magnetometer, confirmed the high ferrous metal content. The team erupted. This was it. This was not a random piece of wreckage. The scale, the material, the location, it all pointed to one unbelievable conclusion. They had found a piece of the lost giant. Finding the fragment was one thing. Bringing it to the surface was a whole other challenge. This was not a delicate pot or a handful of gold coins. This was a multi-ton piece of ancient bronze, fragile from more than 2 millennia of saltwater corrosion. The recovery operation had to be planned with surgical precision. A specialized salvage vessel was brought in, a heavy lift crane, a custom-built cradle. The day of the lift was a global media event. Aegean blue sky, eyes on the churning dive site. The crane began to winch the object up, massive chains grew taut. Then a dark shape broke the surface, streaming water and trailing seaweed. Crowds gasped on shore and boats. Lifted higher, the scale became clear. It was a gigantic hand, a right hand, fingers slightly curled, the size of a small car. Lowered onto the barge, archaeologists swarmed it. Surface covered in marine concretion, sand, shells, minerals, even through the crust, artistry showed. Knuckles, curve of the palm, sheer power in its form, not just metal, a masterpiece. The hand of Helios held a torch or raised in greeting. Initial analysis on the barge stunned the team. Portable XRF scanners confirmed the alloy as 3rd century BC bronze, trace elements linked to Rhodian copper mines. Ultrasonic imaging peered through the concretion. They detected an internal iron framework, the smoking gun. They'd found a piece of the Colossus and confirmed its construction techniques. The legend was real. The recovery of the Hand of Helios sent shockwaves through history and archaeology. It was the equivalent of finding King Arthur's Excalibur or a blueprint for the Hanging Gardens. For centuries the Colossus sat between history and myth. We had texts from Pliny the Elder and Strabo, but without physical proof their accounts were debated. Had they exaggerated its size? Were the construction stories fanciful? This single, massive artifact answered with a resounding no. The ancient historians were telling the truth. It opens a window into Hellenistic technology, the sheer scale of the casting, the internal iron skeleton supporting the bronze skin, shows advanced engineering and metallurgy. Not just art, cutting-edge science for its time. We must re-evaluate ancient craftsmen and engineers. Credit for solving weight problems, balance, and material science on a monumental scale. The hand's location is a crucial clue about where the statue stood. Found outside the main harbor entrance, it argues the Colossus did not straddle the waterway. Instead, it likely stood on a promontory, visible from far at sea. That helps redraw roads in its harbor with archaeological accuracy. The hand is a key piece of a 2,000-year puzzle. It connects us to the past. Reading about a 110-foot bronze statue is one thing. Standing before its hand and being dwarfed by a single finger is another. It makes the past tangible. The discovery of the Hand of Helios is not the end of the story. In fact, it's a new beginning. This single, monumental piece is proof that more of the Colossus is still out there, waiting to be found. We will keep searching the depths, keep listening for whispers from the past, and keep chasing the ghosts of history, because somewhere out there, in the dark and the deep, the rest of the giant is waiting, and we will find it.